Hello everybody, welcome. I'm delighted to have you here. My name is Eric Paley. I'm with a venture fund in town called Founder Collective. I'm lucky to have some of my teammates in the room. I see David and Gaurav from our investment team, there they are. Joe and Toma, who helped organize the whole event. Where's Toma? Can she wave? There she is. We are a seed stage venture capital fund here in Boston. I've been an entrepreneur in Boston since 2002, and I love this town, and I'm very proud of all the great things that are going on here. But I often find that people just don't know of all the amazing things going on in Boston. And that was the inspiration originally for doing Founder Dialogues. When I was an MBA student here, I could hardly name 3 companies in Boston, even though I was a startup guy and I love tech. It just was a community that very quietly goes about its business and does incredible things without getting the stories out there. And I wanted to make sure we're getting the stories out there, because I think if you want to inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs, you have to show them this generation of great entrepreneurs. And so that was the inspiration for this event. We are now on number 15, I think. So is that right? So the hashtag for tonight is #FD15, and we'd greatly appreciate it if you tweet so you can make anyone who didn't show up feel like they missed something very important. And so that's the background of why we're here. I got to do a few thank yous. KPMG has been a great supporter. James is right here, James Cohen from KPMG. Thank you. We use them, by the way. We highly recommend them. I've noticed in this era of startups, feels to me like a lot of our companies start doing audit way too late for a whole bunch of reasons, and then later it turns into a problem. So I recommend you get to know these guys and take that stuff seriously pretty early. I want to thank Accomplice. I'm not sure if anyone's here from Accomplice, but they helped us get this space. You know, there's a new venue for us. They recommended it, and I'm very grateful to them for that. We actually have our next Founder Dialogues already scheduled. It's the first time we've ever done that. I give Joe Flaherty credit for that. But the next one will be August 1st with David Cancel of Drift and HubSpot and Performable and a long, long list of great, cool Boston startups before that. I want to thank Patty Chen, who always does our food. Hopefully Patty and Mark are still here. I don't know if they are, but thank you to them. We recommend Patty Chen's Dumpling House if you haven't been. Dumpling Room. I think I have it slightly wrong. Okay, so with that, let's turn it over to talking about Langley. I'm going to give a brief introduction of Langley, and then we're going to dive right into questions. You could argue that Langley is Boston's most successful serial entrepreneur. He's created 2 companies that I'm going to choose to say are both worth over $1 billion. We don't really know exactly what CarGurus is worth, but we'll talk about some of the facts there. Before CarGurus, he founded TripAdvisor, which I think would be undisputably Boston's largest consumer tech company at this point. Yep. He went to Georgetown. Yep. Kind of unfortunate, given he ultimately loves Dartmouth. But he took one single course in computer programming. I don't know if that tilted him in this direction, but he's done a lot in technology since then. He worked a few years in Wall Street. He did leverage buyouts. He absolutely loved it. Maybe not. Bus lines to ball bearings or something was the range of things you did. Got his MBA at the best school in the Northeast, Dartmouth College, at Tuck, and decided he was going to go into software. Came to Boston to one of its most storied tech companies at the time, Lotus Corporation. Yep. Worked with some other startup companies before joining Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator at ViaWeb, although he wasn't the founder of Y Combinator at the time. He took a job he didn't love in venture capital. We may as well talk about that because I love what I do in venture capital, so we'll find out what it was he didn't love about that. Met Steve Kalfert, who's the co-founder of TripAdvisor. Founded TripAdvisor. Today it's worth $9 billion. Probably another story in Boston that doesn't get as much attention as it deserves. After selling TripAdvisor for more money than you probably needed from the standpoint of not needing to work, you went out and decided you were going to do it again, got himself into a townhouse with a dozen engineers and started again, right? And that was the founding of CarGurus. Today, it's over 300 people, over 100 million in revenue. I know you don't announce numbers, so that's a pretty old number. A little bit over. Yeah, maybe a lot over 100 million in revenue. It's hiring like crazy if anyone's interested. It's a pretty amazing company. If you're in our portfolio, then don't be interested, but everyone else. And with that, let's thank Langley Steinert. Thanks so much for doing this with us today. All right. So CarGurus is a 300-person company with over 100 million in revenue. But I talk to many, many people who don't know anything about CarGurus.
Not yet.
Okay, but why is that? Right? It's a pretty big company for many people, even in town here, not to know.
Yep.
Why is that?
We see that as probably as opportunity more than anything. We get, I believe the last statistics I saw, we have about 20 million unique visitors a month. And the last statistics I saw, ComScore data, we have more average daily traffic than AutoTrader, Kelley Blue Book, Edmunds, Cars.com, or any of our competitors. So we seem to be reaching some consumers.
Right.
Yeah, probably the best answer would be that we haven't yet, I stress the word yet, more kind of mass media marketing. To date, the company's been focused more on build a great product, build the word of mouth. We do some pretty aggressive search engine marketing, but we haven't done more broad-based marketing yet. Sarah Welch, who's in the audience, just joined us recently from Gazelle, and it's her charter to change that. But I think you'll probably be seeing more mass media marketing from us soon.
So this is a bit of a theme, right? I had Chad Lawrence from Simply Safe before, and before that I had Neeraj and Steve Conine from Wayfair.
Yep.
And it seems like Boston companies wait a long time before they start investing in branding. And then you see West Coast companies that right out of the gate, and we're not talking about mass media, but do a lot of publicity, a lot of branding. What do you think about that strategically? Have you made the right choice there, and if so, why?
Well, I don't think there's any right or wrong answer to that question. I think it's a question of style, control, and iterative evolution. So when I was at TripAdvisor with Steve, we had a philosophy which was we used to joke with Steve that he was probably the cheapest guy I've ever worked with in my life. We had to beg him to allow us to buy a laser printer. Literally, we had to beg him to buy a laser printer. But
I've been to that cafeteria. He's
yeah,
spending big money now, yeah.
They've got real money now. But when we first started TripAdvisor, we were really frugal, and the focus was let's get to profitability as quickly as we can. Let's not necessarily worry about world domination. Let's try to get to profitability, and then we'll scale from there. And that's been the same philosophy at CarGurus, where we were focused from day one on small iterations to get to profitability. And once we got to profitability, and we've been profitable for 8 straight years, never missed a month, it has allowed us the flexibility to get more aggressive in marketing. But probably more importantly, it allows us to have control of our destiny, because we haven't raised a monster $60, $100 million venture round. And the board of directors for CarGurus actually is, I jokingly refer to them as friends and family. I've got Steve Coffer from TripAdvisor. I've got the former co-founder of eBay Motors. These are people that I've known through my life. We still have a very spirited board meeting, but there's no one on my board who's pounding the table to say, I need a 3x return in my 5-year time span. We're more focused on the long haul and how to build a big company. Yeah, again, to circle back into your question, that's not necessarily right or wrong. I mean, you can go raise the $100 million if you want, right. And it does happen. I mean, Facebook turned out okay, and Twitter turned out pretty well, and Pinterest has turned out well. So it can happen.
But you worked with Sarah before, right? You could have hired her when you had 20 million in sales. Instead, you waited till you were many, many multiples of 100.
And that was my mistake.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. But I want to just understand that, because I think it's a repeating theme even among the really successful companies in Boston, that they don't do a lot to publicize themselves early. Is there a mistake there? Is there an opportunity cost in that in any way, or no?
Again, I don't think there's any right or wrong answer. I know for us, build a great product, get the word of mouth going, be really aggressive in search engine marketing, and obviously it worked for us, so it seems to have worked for us. But again, it's not necessarily right or wrong. And people on the West Coast, I would agree, have a different style. Yeah. Which is raise a big round, shoot for the fences, which is great if it works. Right. But if it doesn't work, it's not so fun. Because if you're an entrepreneur and you've raised a $100 million round and things don't go so well, you're probably not going to have a job for very long. So I personally like, when I start companies, be it with Steve or on my own, I like to be in control. So if in the history of TripAdvisor, we only raised in the history of the company like $4.5 million of capital. let that sink in for a second. We
Nine-
raised
$9
$4.5
billion
million
market
of
cap.
capital, and the company has a $9 billion market cap now. CarGurus, I'm I guess proud to say, and I can disclose it, I think it's been publicized somewhere, that we raised about $5.5 million of capital in the history of the company. And
Why were you so much less efficient? No. All right,
I didn't have Steve with me.
You didn't have Steve. You bought laser printers.
Yeah,
and you shouldn't have.
I shouldn't have bought those
$1 million
laser
in
printers.
laser printers. All right, so let's go back a whole ways. Let's bash on banking for just a minute, because if there's anyone in the audience who's even thinking about a career
Yeah.
there or consulting,
Fun
where I come at it.
times.
Why'd you hate it so much?
Well, let me talk about why I fell into it in the first place.
Okay.
So I was a senior in college at Georgetown University, and how many of you have seen the movie Chitty Chitty Bang Bang? Okay. If you haven't seen it, you really should see it. There's a scene in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang where these two little kids are playing with their toys, and in runs this, this wagon with this kind of free toys, free candy, and the kids become mesmerized, and they unfortunately fall into the trap of getting into this wagon, and they're carted off and never heard from again. And that's kind of what happened to me in college when
I was with you.
when
Same
the cart
mistake.
came into school and they talked about the fancy dinners and how you're going to change the world and you're going to be captains of industry, and I unfortunately fell for it. And I got stuck in that wagon and never heard from again for 3 years. Investment banking at that point was kind of the hot thing to do.
Yeah.
Go to Wall Street, advise captains of industry, work on sexy projects. The reality of the fact is I got to Wall Street and I proceeded, I'm not kidding you, my first 365 days I did not have a day off. I worked every weekend. Most nights I was working until 3 in the morning. And usually I was working on some deal for some company that I didn't even know the name of, building some massive model to try to predict how much debt we could put on the company. So it was tough work. I didn't really enjoy it. And I kind of had this epiphany in my second year that I had to get out of there, and I didn't ever want to do that kind of work again. I didn't want to work in an industry where I didn't have a passion for something, where I didn't wake up in the morning with excitement to go to work, because I dreaded going to work, believe me.
I started my career in this building working for Monitor, hating work every day. So
I've given this speech at Dartmouth, at Harvard, and MIT, where I plead with undergrads to please, 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 resist the allure of McKinsey, Goldman, fill in the name of the company, and go work for a company where you produce something and where you have a passion for what you do. Because honestly, and I tell my own kids this now, like if you don't do something you're passionate about, you'll never be any good.
Yep.
Irregardless of the money.
Yep. So you go to Tuck, you graduate, somehow you decide you've got to get into software.
Yeah, well, so the one thing I did take away from working on Wall Street was that I was really fascinated with what you could do with a spreadsheet. I mean, it was really amazing what you could do with a spreadsheet. You could model an entire industry on a computer screen, and with some varying levels of accuracy.
Even to 5 a.m. you can do
Yeah,
it.
yeah. You could get some sense of where this company could go. And so I was fascinated with software, and I knew, I guess, one thing I did well was when I came into business school at Tuck, I knew I wanted to go into the software industry. I was bound and determined. And pretty much everyone else in my class wasn't. So I was the only guy, I think when I graduated from Tuck in like May or so, I'm pretty sure I was the only person in my entire class who didn't have a job. Let alone the only person in my class who wasn't making over $200,000 a year. I went to work as an assistant product manager at Lotus. And I think when I started, they weren't able to give me a full-time offer. I think I was like a part-time consultant. So I worked for basically, I forget what my salary was, but it was measly at best. But I knew that's what I wanted to do for a living, and I loved it. I loved working with developers. I loved creating products. And even today, I love what I do for a living. I mean, I talk to my kids, and they sometimes when they ask me, what do you do at work? And I sometimes find that a funny question, because I really don't think what I do is work. I mean, I love what I do. I mean, to be clear, there are some days that
Not everything.
that aren't always fun. We can talk about that in a second. But for the most part, I love what I do for a living. And honestly, making money is kind of an end result that isn't really the goal. It's creating great products. The biggest high of all is when you go to a cocktail party and you're talking with some friends and say, hey, where do you work? And when it was TripAdvisor, their eyes would light up. They're like, oh my God, that's the coolest product ever. That's the biggest high of all, is talking to a real consumer that uses your product and seeing their excitement.
I love TripAdvisor, by the way. As an aside, I use it all the time. So, and then tell the story of how you ended up leaving Lotus, because I think it actually speaks a little bit to...
So I had this wonderful VP I worked for, and she was great. She really was. So I'm not saying this in any way in a critical manner, but I remember my first review, she sat me down, and she said, you're doing great work, you really are, but I need to talk to you about one thing you're doing that's you got to stop doing. And I was like, sure, like, what is it? She goes, you got to stop coming in on Sunday. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? What's wrong with that? She goes, well, it's just kind of weirding everyone out. Like, you come in on Sundays, and everyone wants to know why you're coming in on Sunday.
You worked way too hard.
And I was like, well, I mean, part of the answer was like, well, where I used to work, I'd come in on Saturday and Sunday. So coming in on Sunday is like kind of loafing off a little bit. But I was excited about what I was doing, and I don't know, I didn't think that was such a bad thing. So that was kind of inkling number one. And then inkling number two is, on my own time, I wrote a business plan for a graphing product, because I thought the graphing module in 123, the spreadsheet, which probably no one's ever heard of at this point.
It's legend.
Yes.
It is.
Or even the graphing product in Freelance, which is the product I worked on, was pretty miserable. And I thought, well, there has to be a better product. If you're really into doing graphs, there has to be a better solution. So I wrote this whole business plan for creating a whole new product line at Lotus with like kind of a dedicated graphing product. And I wrote the plan, I gave it to my boss and the GM of my division, and that set off all sorts of tidal waves. And she kind of took me aside and said, let me just kind of give you the ropes here. Like, to become a full product manager and have your own product, that will happen with time, but it's going to probably be 4 or 5 years. And that was it. Like, when she told me that, I was like, I'm out of here. Like,
it had really become a big company.
And she was being very nice. She wasn't trying to be critical. She was like, you got to pay your dues and it'll come. And I was like, that's not how I work. Like I'm about meritocracy. Like, if I have a good idea and let me run with it, don't gate me and tell me I have to wait 4 or 5 years. So that was when I began to look for startups.
Does that speak to how you manage today? When people come in the room, it doesn't matter, they've been there 6 weeks?
You'd have to ask the people who work with me. So, but I'd hope they would say yes. I'm pretty hands-off. I think for the most part, I hire great people. I give them pretty wide latitude. I try not to micromanage. I literally have one meeting a week I sit in hopefully one meeting a week. That's my goal. I sit with my management team from noon to typically 3:30 on Mondays, and we go over what are the priorities, what are the problems, what can we tackle as a group, and then that's it. Like, in best of all worlds, I don't want to...
Just go run.
Go run. Yeah. Go do what you need to do and check in with me if there's a problem, but I've got plenty of things I'm trying to accomplish myself. What I don't ever want to become is like someone who manages full-time.
Yeah.
I don't like managing.
You're a leader, not a manager.
I like to do stuff. I want to go do deals, or I want to go meet with customers, or I want to talk with developers about products. I don't want to be managing people. So
you leave Lotus. Yep. You have several adventures that unto themselves are all pretty interesting. And then you get introduced to Paul Graham.
Yes.
Who becomes pretty legendary. What were your impressions of Paul Graham at the time when you were joining Via Web? And that turned out to be a pretty hot company unto itself. But tell us about Paul Graham.
Brilliant. Brilliant, opinionated, and those are probably the two I would use.
Does it shock you how impactful he's become?
Yes and no. I mean, no in the sense that Paul is next to it's probably a tie, whether Steve Koffer or Paul are two of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. So his pure intelligence is probably not a surprise factor why Y Combinator's been so great. I also think his connection with young developers, I mean, they look up to him for good reason as one of them. He's not one of those. So I don't know who I'll pick on in the VC world, but, well, I won't. But, I mean, if a typical VC walks into a room, typically wearing what I'm wearing,
you can use me as the example.
Wearing a VC outfit. No, I'll be... typically, that person probably won't have been a coder. They probably won't, oftentimes haven't even started a company. They're an ex-investment banker or whatever. So if you're a 28-year-old or 26-year-old from MIT, not real clear that you're going to gravitate to that person.
Yep.
as opposed to Paul, who's a Harvard PhD computer scientist, who, if you know anything about coding, is like a legend unto himself just from his blog and his coding ethics. I mean, he's a legend. So
Totally.
He's one of them. So they trust him.
So Joe Flaherty and I were today having a debate about whether Mark Zuckerberg leaving Boston or Paul Graham leaving Boston was a bigger loss for Boston. How different do you think, in some different way?
Yeah, I was always surprised that Paul left Boston.
Yeah.
Because Boston, and we're beginning to transition to a different question, but
yeah.
Boston has all the components for great startups. And you've asked me this question, Scott Kirshner's asked me this question, why is it we don't have more great companies in Boston? Or why would you ever start a great company in Boston? And I always find that a strange question because, well, first of all, Kayak's been started here. Kayak, TripAdvisor, Wayfair, HubSpot's in this building. I mean, I'd like to believe CarGurus is part of that.
Sonos is a cool hardware company here in this building.
So there's a lot of great examples of companies that have done it. There's great technical talent, Harvard, MIT, Brown University, Wellesley.
Dartmouth,
Cornell. I mean, some of the greatest technical talent in the world is right at your doorstep. And probably most importantly, there's no competition. Like if you're trying to start a company here, well, as I have, and you're trying to retain great technical talent, I mean, there's some people you have to compete with, like HubSpot or in Wayfair, and ironically, my old company, TripAdvisor.
Yep.
But you're not up against 60 companies, and you're not constantly being bombarded with recruiters trying to poach your developers. So the talent's here. There's less competition. There's plenty of capital. There's plenty of VCs. So I continue to wonder why people even want to talk about this topic.
Yes, but maybe
they do.
Maybe because Paul left. I don't know. But so we can stop talking about that and talk about after Via Web sells.
Yep.
You end up joining Flagship, which at the time had a different name, One Liberty.
One Liberty Ventures, yeah.
And you're going to be a venture capitalist.
Well, I'm going to try it. I'm going to try to see if I like it.
But I think it's pretty awesome. But you really didn't like.
I didn't like it, no. And that has nothing to do with Flagship, because Ed Kania, who's the partner there, was very gracious, gave me a lot of great opportunities, and all the partners there were very nice to me. So this is not a condemnation of Flagship or One Liberty, as much as just the general industry wasn't a good fit for me.
Why?
I mean, I'm trying to say this without offending anyone.
No, offend me. Don't be shy. I'm going to come after you a little later, so go for it.
I missed doing. If you're first of all, being in the venture capital industry is a really hard. So I learned a couple things. Number one, I learned the venture capital industry is really hard work.
Yeah.
You're marketing a commodity, money. Everyone's got money. The money coming out of your fund versus Sequoia versus Matrix,
ours
it's the same money.
Ours is a little bit greener.
When you can put it in the bank, it's the same money. It's a commodity. And marketing commodities is really hard work. I don't like marketing commodities. I like marketing things that have a really wide point of differentiation.
Yep.
So that's the first point. Second of all, most days are actually kind of dull. You have 10 meetings, and probably 10 of those meetings are just
clunkers,
mind-bogglingly boring.
Yeah.
And typically, you're like 15 minutes into the meeting, you're like, okay, how can I get out of this meeting? I used to have like a little game I'd play with my assistant, and I was like, can you call me in 10 minutes? if I give you the signal, can you get me out of this meeting? So it's really hard. You do a lot of boring meetings, you're marketing a commodity, and occasionally you might find a great company. And I did, this is part of the story, is I was a partner at Flagship, a venture partner, and I got wind of Steve Kaufer. Paul Graham, who is the founder of ViaWeb, called me up. I don't know if he called me up or somehow I had an interaction with him, and he said, you really ought to go meet with this guy, Steve Kaufer. He's creating this travel search engine thing, and I think you guys might hit it off. So I went and had lunch with Steve, and I was fascinated with Steve. I was fascinated with the idea, and I started out as an investor in TripAdvisor.
So you convinced your partnership to put money in?
Yeah, so Flagship invested some money, seed money, the first money in TripAdvisor, and as part of the deal, I became chairman. So I worked with Steve, but I was kind of like a 2-day-a-week chairman. And then about a year into it, I kind of turned to my partners and was like, guys, I kind of think I want to go do that. That's a lot more interesting than what I'm doing now. So Steve was nice enough to let me come on board as co-founder and chairman. And to be clear, Steve was CEO. From day one,
tell us
Steve
about
was
that
CEO.
dynamic. This
it was
co-founder,
phenomenal.
chairman. and founder, CEO.
Yep.
How does that work? And by the way, doesn't every MBA require being CEO? I thought that was part of the...
No, believe me, I was smart. I believe I was smart enough to know that Steve needed to be CEO. Steve deserved to be CEO.
Yeah.
And we had an agreement. Like, I'm just here to help. Like, you're the CEO. And believe me, there were many aspects of that today that I understand what a blessing it was. Like, let's be clear. Being CEO is not always a lot of fun.
Yep.
There's a lot of crap you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis that in retrospect, and even when I was doing it, I was like, oh, that's great. Steve's dealing with that.
You go do that.
I'm going to go work on this partnership. I'm going to go work on this deal. I'm going to go work on some, our first deal with Travelocity or Expedia, or how to build up the PR machine. So I had lots of interesting things to go do. But to be clear, Steve was CEO, and thank God he was, because small plug for Steve. I mean, he is one, perhaps next to Paul, the smartest people I've ever worked with. One of the this is no knock on Paul, but Steve is one of the greatest people I've ever worked with, both technically and just as a human being. He's still on my board. He's on my board at CarGurus. There's not a board meeting that doesn't go by when Steve doesn't say something where I'm like, oh man, wish I thought of that. So he's unique. I mean, he's a great technologist. He's a great business person, and just a great human being.
So in the world of Boston tech, TripAdvisor is probably the outlier of outliers.
Kayak's pretty good.
Kayak's pretty good.
But
TripAdvisor attained 5x the value of Kayak.
Yep.
What would you say were the core success factors of that company? What did you observe when you were there? And I'm sure the answer goes on and on and on, is very long, but because there are probably many things. But what really stands out to you if you just look at the lessons? If you were giving a talk to a classroom of entrepreneurs just about TripAdvisor, what are the
It's the same talk I give about CarGurus. So the lessons I give this top 10 things to think about if you're starting a company. And number one I tell people is raise as little money as possible. Iterate your business plan as often as possible. You already had this founders dialogue with Steve, so this is kind of old news. But TripAdvisor came within like 3 months of running out of money. We had the wrong business plan. We had this search engine that actually indexed other web pages. So we'd pull up New York Times articles or Fedora's articles about Paris. There was no user review in the entire product to begin with. And so we had the wrong product that no one wanted to pay us money for. And we're like, oh my God, this isn't going to work. And so thank God we were able to iterate. Our burn rate, this gets back to raising as little money as possible, our burn rate was so low that we literally could run on fumes for like 6 more months. And so we had enough runway to iterate a bunch of different things, to try a new product, a new business model, and thank God it worked.
Yep.
And same thing with CarGurus, actually. We started the company with like a user reviews for cars. Wouldn't it be great if we created a site where people could read user reviews about cars, just like TripAdvisor?
Yep.
It's a horrible idea. We got about a year into it, or a year and a half into it.
You were going to repeat the whole playbook exactly, and then at some point you said,
yeah, we're like,
this is never going to work.
This is never going to be anything. So I huddled with my developers, just like we did at TripAdvisor, and said, God, folks, like, we got to try something different here. This isn't going to work. And we did the same thing. We iterated this different concept of like, well, what if we did like what Kayak does for cars? So we did this like price engine where we could help people find the lowest priced cars. Maybe that'll work. And to be clear, we had no idea if it was going to work. So we coded up some stuff and threw it out there, and lo and behold, traffic started taking off. Just like at TripAdvisor, where we started this concept of user reviews, and then we were like, well, we could also create these dynamic commerce links that deep link into Expedia and Travelocity, and maybe they'll pay us some money.
Right.
And bam, it took off.
And in that sense, the model is still the same, right? Is if you can figure out a way to bring value to the consumer, user reviews or price, in the case of CarGurus.
Well, yeah, I mean, to state the obvious, you need to come out with a unique product that has value to consumers. And I'm not talking about medical products or devices or hardware, but if you can create a big audience around a topic that is monetizable, you've got a business. So
in the case of TripAdvisor, that was selling leads to Expedia effectively, or whomever. In the case of CarGurus, just explain exactly how the monetization works.
So for those of you who don't know what CarGurus does, CarGurus is a shopping platform that allows consumers, no matter how they search, anywhere in the United States, whatever cars they want, we will do the math for you in terms of finding which cars are priced lowest below the market. So I'll draw I'll juxtapose it to our competitor, AutoTrader. AutoTrader, you can do the same search. They'll give you the same 1,300 Ford Focuses in Boston, but they're going to ordinate those cars based on, honestly, who pays them the most money. You're going to wade through 4 pages of sponsored search results before you even get to the cars that might be of interest to you. Ours is a completely different model, which is that we ordinate those cars not based on who pays us the most money, but based on which car is priced the farthest below the market. And we literally put on every listing, great deal, good deal, fair deal, poor deal, overpriced, I believe, are the monikers. That's what's kind of become our claim to fame, is that consumers, unlike going to our competitors, they actually get great insights into the true value of the car. You know, to draw another analogy, it's kind of like Zillow for cars. Right. And that's why we've gone from essentially 0 to 20 million unique visitors a month, is because people are craving that sort of transparency in the auto shopping experience.
Let's dive into that a little more, because we see a lot of companies that come to us where the product is pretty intriguing as user experience, but they never get discovered, right? So it's not as simple, right, as we create a better pricing algorithm for price discovery, and all of a sudden 20 million people came to us.
No, they don't come overnight, no.
Translate that. How would you advise somebody who, like you guys, have created a good value proposition for consumers, they're not getting discovered? How did you overcome that burden?
So some of the guerrilla marketing tactics we used was PR. Amy Mueller's in the audience. She's been our PR maven from essentially day one. We were really aggressive about using different cuts of the data, doing kind of clever press releases around. Some of them, you know, honestly pretty inane. You know, top 10 cars for 4th of July, you know. And the irony, not to get off on a tangent, is that the more in-depth the analysis, the more groundbreaking, the less the press will pick it up. And the more kind of simplistic and straightforward, it gets a lot of pickup. So it's really mind-boggling how much press you can get out of doing data-driven releases. And we get a ton of press. We still do. So that's number one. Number two, we are, you know, both the TripAdvisor and CarGurus, we are really aggressive search engine marketing folks. In both places, totally homegrown. We weren't hiring some agency. And for those of you that don't know much about search engine marketing, what we did really well at both places is what's called mining the tail, kind of going for keywords that no one would ever think about. So the most search traffic follows kind of a curve where what's called the head is the really kind of the duh terms, like in our case, Ford Focus.
Right.
You know,
used car.
You and everyone else is going to be bidding on Ford Focus. But if you bid on the terms that are the little tiny terms that no one would ever think about, like 2012 Ford Focus LE, aluminum wheels, Gloucester, Massachusetts. No one's going to bid on that. Right. And you have to have huge scale. It's almost like running a hedge fund for keywords. So, you know, we bid on 51 million keywords a night, and we built the architecture to, you know, track that consumer all the way through our site, figure out how much we make, how much did it cost us, recalculate the bids every night. It's a big math problem.
And it's building software for marketing.
Yeah, it's like, it's as I said, it's like running a big math model for keywords. And there's a lot of knowledge we have, some of which I brought over from my last life at TripAdvisor. But if done at scale, can be very, very efficient. I mean, we don't lose money on search engine, but we make money on marketing, which is all my competitors are, you know, meanwhile losing money on marketing. So,
talk about how you chose this category, right? You're not a car guy, right? It's not.
Nope.
You don't.
I wasn't a travel guy either.
You weren't a travel guy,
no.
but you met Steve and you were inspired. This one, de novo, you decided I'm going into cars.
Well, I had a big non-compete for travel, so I couldn't go back into travel because otherwise I would have gone right back into travel.
Paul English seems to be doing fine with that.
I mean, travel really is like the perfect storm for where to build a great e-commerce company because it's a huge category. It's research intensive. The transaction is done online. Right. It's obviously there are a ton of transactions in terms of transactional value. So I knew I couldn't go into that. I looked at real estate and autos. I knew I wanted to do a research-intensive website around commerce. I looked at real estate and autos, and you know, Rich Barton had started Zillow, so I wasn't about to go tangle with Rich Barton. And then so kind of began to hone in on autos. Big category, a lot of research. If you make a mistake, it's a painful one because you're not going to buy another car for 4 to 5 years. A lot of money. And with all due respect to my competitors, because some of my competitors are really big companies. I mean, AutoTrader, I think, does over $1 billion a year in revenues. So clearly they're doing something right. But I didn't think there was a lot of innovation in this category. And even today, I would argue there hasn't been much innovation. So I saw a big category, research intensive, not a lot of innovation going on. Looks pretty good. So that's how we picked autos.
And how'd you get conviction on it? What was the process of?
Well, I didn't get it for about 2.5 years.
Okay.
Believe me, there were moments where I thought this isn't going to work. So the conviction probably, the only true form of conviction for me was when we turned profitable, which I think was like in...
It's a bit of a high standard for conviction.
What? That is the goal, to be clear,
If venture capitalists use that conviction standard, we'd never invest in anything, right?
Well, maybe it's old-fashioned, but that is the goal. Like, right. I see that as the goal. I sometimes also chuckle when I see someone take out a press release that says, we raised $60 million. That's, in my opinion, nothing to be proud of.
Right.
That just says you gave away 25, 30% of your company, and your exit strategy just went up like 5x. Like, anyone who comes along to offer you money, you just have to now to say no to, because you need to have an exit 5x that before you can leave.
So let's talk about the raising money thing. Obviously, there were many points along the way you could have chosen to raise money. You raised angel money at the beginning.
Yeah, so let me back up. So on CarGurus, I have to kind of put this in context. I mean, I understand very much that I was lucky enough to have had a really good win with TripAdvisor, as did all the TripAdvisor mafia that funded CarGurus. So Steve, myself, some friends and family, some people I know, who all did really well on TripAdvisor. We just passed the hat around, and we funded it. So that's a pretty unique situation.
But $5.5 million isn't much, especially given how far you guys have gotten.
I don't know too many entrepreneurs that have got that money sitting around.
That's for sure. No, but I just think, to me, it's like, well, same question I asked about Sarah before, right? At 20 million, no doubt, lots of VCs would have wanted to give you growth capital.
Yeah.
At 50 million, lots of VCs would want to give you growth capital. You've probably had people knocking on your door the entire time you've been building this company, and you've pretty much said no the entire time. I guess you eventually, it took a very sort of late.
Yeah, so I mean, the reason why we haven't taken any other capital on to date is we haven't had to, because the company's been generating cash for 6-7 years now. Secondly, all the investors, including myself, don't need the money back, don't want the money back. I mean, the IRR on our money is ridiculous. There's no other alternative asset class that I could ever find that I can get the kind of IRR I've got now, pre-tax. Right. And I've literally had this lecture with someone from, I won't mention the name, but some growth equity firm called me, and just for yucks, I picked up the phone and was kind of toying with the person, saying like, well, tell me, like, do you know an asset class where I can get a 130% pre-tax IRR? The answer is no. Okay, then why would I ever sell stock? Right. So that's kind of the answer. But again, it's a unique situation.
This is specific to the folks who call hoping to give some liquidity to founders and stuff, and not necessarily capitalize the company, but give liquidity. Yeah. And you guys have largely said no. That makes total sense. Yep. So let's talk about that profitability, right? You said 8 years of profitability.
Yep.
Do you think you could have grown faster if you reinvested more aggressively in the business? Was there an opportunity cost to emphasizing that so much? And if not, boy, that really makes a big statement about the foolishness of the way we're all investing in our companies. Feel free to call us fools.
I think the only thing we could have done differently, and that's why Sarah's on board with us now, is we probably could have invested in the brand earlier, and we probably should have, because I've had some of our board members say, gee, you are profitable. Yes, you do get a lot of traffic from various sources, but you really ought to be building your domain direct traffic, because that becomes your asset that no one can ever take away from you. And we get a lot of domain direct traffic already, but it's never as high as you'd like it to be. So in retrospect, that's probably one of the things we should have done. Yep. But pretty much, so when I say we were profitable over the last 7 or 8, we weren't profitable by much. We were reinvesting every conceivable dollar back into marketing. Yeah. Mostly search engine marketing. And as a result, we've grown at like a breakneck pace. So
could it have been faster?
Yeah, but I sleep better at night being profitable.
So maybe it would have been.
I mean, that's a tangential topic. Is that again, maybe old-fashioned. Maybe that is why Boston's different than San Francisco. But I sleep better at night knowing that we're profitable and that I don't have to worry about raising that next round of capital. And and to put it kind of in human terms, like when I hire an employee, I want to be able, I know that there's like a spouse and kids behind that, and I don't ever want to have to lay them off.
Right.
So I sleep better at night knowing I can make my payroll, I don't have to worry about raising that next round, and everyone that works in my company is set for the near future.
It's fascinating to me because I have...
And that is very old-fashioned.
Well,
That's very Boston.
It's certainly old-fashioned. It's certainly very Boston. But I also wonder often whether all we do with a lot of capital is magnify the problems, as opposed to really get to what matters in these companies. And that, sometimes you don't have $5 million to start out, and we're lucky enough to play at that seed stage where people clearly do really need that capital. But I do wonder with a lot of the huge rounds.
This doesn't apply to if you're doing you're in the medical device business, or you have to do drug trials, or you're doing hardware routers where you got to create inventory. That doesn't work.
Right.
But if you're doing web-based applications,
which has gotten cheaper and cheaper, right?
I'm not really sure why you need to raise $50 million. I just don't get it.
Totally. So I'm going to quote you on something. I hope you don't mind. You've said, "I could give a shit what you think."
I never said that.
Not to me. What can you prove?
Yeah. So
what does that mean? And
So I got that trade from Steve Coffer, is that the best way to run a company is to follow the data. Like, everyone's got an opinion. So one of the phrases we have in our company is like, opinions are like religion. Everyone's got one, and they think it's better than the next one. So again, when I'm in a meeting or I'm talking to someone, I really don't give a shit what they believe. Tell me what they can prove. Like, so do you have the data to back up what you're claiming? Or even if you have a hypothesis, have you gone to go do the A/B test to prove whether it works or not?
is everyone empowered to just go do that?
Not only is everyone empowered to do it, but even my ideas get shot down all the time. Like stuff I think is just brilliant. The A/B test comes back and says I'm an idiot. So I live by the same standard. Like, there are no sacred cows. And so, it's just so much simpler if you run a company. I know it sounds simple, but it's surprising how many companies don't do it.
So let's go to the tension about it. What role does instinct or gut play then?
There is no instinct for gut.
What about at the beginning?
Well, my instinct was wrong. We started a company that had the wrong product, so clearly that didn't work.
But then you tried something else without A/B testing.
Yeah, but we iterated quickly and incrementally and tested and drew the data back. And one of the beautiful things about running a web company is you can iterate things quickly if you have some scale. So in our case, we have 20 million unique visitors. We can run an A/B test in like 6 hours and tell whether something's got any traction or not. And one of the things we do, and I think Steve talked about it your last talk with him as well, is we run these things called 404 tests. And some of the usability folks in the crowd will probably gasp when I talk about this, but oftentimes we'll have an idea for a product, and instead of like writing a functional spec and doing focus groups and getting the functional spec approved and writing the code, and 9 months later shipping something, we'll do what's called a 404 test. So we'll do a call out on our site somewhere that'll have like a call to action for that. And we'll measure what the click-through rate is. And if the click-through rate's below an acceptable range, we'll be like, well, no one's interested in that. And if the click-through rate's high, we'll say, wow, it looks like someone is interested in that. So before we even write the code or even like spec out the product, we'll test with our consumers to see if they have any interest in it. Now, to be clear, just to allay everyone's fears, we do it within like 4 hours on a small part of our traffic. And we have a landing page that says, sorry, this is under construction, come back soon.
But you can assess
Sorry for
the
inconveniencing you.
But you're able to assess the
it.
interest
Yeah,
and figure out.
Yeah.
Speaking of writing the spec, designing the feature,
Yep.
You're not wild about product management, which is where you started your software career.
Yeah, I was a product manager.
What's the philosophy there? You have 300 people and I think no
there's
product managers,
Yeah, there's
right?
an evolving story to that one. So I would say up until about a year ago, that was true. We didn't have any product managers. We would hire engineers who were empowered to think of the product, write the product, ship the product, and do the whole soup to nuts experience. And the benefit of that is you tend to recruit great engineers. Great engineers want to work in that environment.
They feel very empowered.
They feel empowered. The worst case is, so I'll pick on IBM, well, I'll pick on Lotus, right? At Lotus, where I used to work, we would write a functional spec of 25 pages, including wireframes, and we would go do focus groups and get it approved, and then we would start writing the code. And honestly, in this day and age, that's dehumanizing for a developer. Now, having said all that, we've reached a point as a company where we're 300 employees, and that's beginning to strain a little bit. And we are actually beginning to bring in carefully some product managers to help not necessarily tell developers what to write, as much as act as an interface with all the other parts of the company, because we have so many parts of the company now. It used to be, me and 8 developers, and we'd go to Cambridge One at Harvard Square, and we'd come up with some ideas, have some pizza, and go back and write the code. That doesn't work anymore. With 300 employees, we have, I don't know, 160 people in sales now. We have, I don't know how many people in marketing. We have a PR group. We have customers. We have investors. Soon to be more investors. We have finance. We have budgets. We have a lot of people that need to know about this stuff. And so typically the way we're positioning it with our dev team so that they don't become disenchanted with the whole process is say, listen, there are all these constituents who need to know what's going on. Look at this as a benefit. Here's someone who's going to communicate everything so you don't need to deal with it. You don't need to go deal with sales. You don't need to deal with marketing. You don't need to deal with PR. This person's going to take that off your plate. And I think if you position it as such, it's actually a benefit and not a curse.
You said
we'll see.
You said a minute ago, soon to have more investors.
Yes.
Can you comment on that?
No.
Okay. I would have been remiss if I didn't ask.
I will say that we will go public. It probably won't be for a while. I mean, my goal is to put it off as long as I can, but I understand that at some point we have to go public.
The IPO market right now could really use a fast growth, highly profitable
I've been told that.
IPO. That would be very good for everybody. There haven't been very many in recent years. Well, let's talk about something public investors wouldn't like. Let's talk about your cocaine business model. What does that mean?
So both at TripAdvisor and at CarGurus.
Well, maybe they'll love it actually, but anyway.
Typically the way we work with our dealer community, I'll stick with CarGurus and not evolve back to TripAdvisor, but actually let me start with TripAdvisor. So when we first started TripAdvisor, Steve had created this great product, and I was many times trying to figure out what do we do with this traffic. And so Steve had the idea of actually crawling Expedia's entire site without even asking them, and putting these contextual links all over the site. So if you're researching the Georges V in Paris, there'd be a contextual link that would deep link you into Expedia's site. And so we did all this without even asking their permission, put it up live, and started blasting traffic at Expedia. And we literally got a phone call like 2 days later. And they're like, first of all, what the hell are you doing? Second of all, no one gave you permission to do it. By the way, can we have more of that? So it worked. And that's kind of the bit of the idea is like, give the customer, give them what they want, tease them with the traffic, and then present them with the bill. And it's kind of what we've done at CarGurus, where any dealer can be on our site. This is where we're different than our competitors, by the way. Any dealer can be on our site for free. They can get free traffic. And we have a lot, I think like 60% of our inventory is from dealers who aren't even paying us money. And the kind of the relationship goes a little bit like this. So we'll send you free traffic, but what you're going to get is there'll be no phone leads. You're going to get an email lead from us that'll say, L Stein 369 at CarGurus is interested in your car. You won't get the customer's email address. So the dealer's going to get a sense of our scale, and believe me, we can blow their doors off with the scale we send them. And they'll get a general sense of our close rate, like how many of these leads turn into sold cars. And if you can prove those 2 dimensions, they are hooked. They're like, oh my God, you're helping me sell like 10, 12 cars a month. Like, okay, I give up. I want the phone numbers. I want the email addresses. How much do I have to pay you? And as a result, we're signing up hundreds of dealers a month. So
tell a little bit, you shared with me a story of what the script is like for the sales guys when somebody calls up and says, what the hell are you doing?
Yep.
Who are you? And I'm not going to pay
for
this.
So when we first, to be clear, just to let everyone know, it wasn't all yucks and giggles. In the first couple of years when we came out with this great deal, good deal, bad deal moniker on the inventory, a lot of dealers called us up with some language I can't repeat here, like, what the hell are you doing? Like, who the hell do you think you are? You're judging my inventory. I didn't give you permission to do that. And so typically, after we calmed them down a little bit, we trained our sales department to say, okay, Amy, tell me the name of your dealership. Okay, so it's, Amy's Ford in Lexington, and so I just want to confirm, you want me to remove your inventory from our site? Got it, great. Amy, before I remove your inventory, I just want to remind you that last month we sent you 25 email leads and 25 phone leads. And typically there's a silence on the other end of that. Really?
Yeah, they don't
And
know.
no, I can tell you the VIN numbers and the customer's address, customer's name if you want. Really? Yeah. Okay, well, so you still want me to remove that? And they're like, no, don't do that. Like, but can you tell me, like, how can I get more of that? So it's that
flip.
Yeah, they honestly turn into customers at that point. So.
Which brings me to what I understand to have been sort of one of the most dramatic moments in the history of the company, right? Which is your largest partner at one time, before you guys were going to the dealerships, was Cars.com.
Yep.
And you were they were 80% of your revenue?
Around a little bit less than that, but sizable.
Pretty big.
Yeah.
Certainly if you're going public, you wouldn't want to tell that story about one customer being that much of your revenue. And they decided to turn you off.
Yeah, so this is a funny story. So I was in the Denver airport with my wife on February 14th. It's her birthday, by the way. And I was going to Colorado to go skiing.
Sounds like it's going to be a romantic story.
It's going to be a great weekend. I'm with our kids. It's our annual trip to Colorado to go skiing. And I'm changing planes in Denver. I checked my email, and there's an email from not the CEO of Cars.com, but basically the number 2. And he basically is like, listen, hate to break it to you, but we're getting divorced. Like, we're not going to work with you anymore. And so I'm like, oh my God, like, this is bad. This is like 70% of my revenue just went poof. And
how many years in are you at this point?
I think like 4 or 5.
And how big is revenue?
North of 50 million.
So and we're talking
sizable, real money.
$35+ million gone.
Yeah, so we had to kind of scramble to see, well, can we, I don't know, we have no choice. Can we go dealer direct? Can we build a sales force to sell these leads direct to dealers ourselves? And I remember taking 3 people from our content group, and I took them aside, and I was like, listen, folks, it was 1 woman and 2 guys, and I was like, guys, I'm not sure if this is even going to work, but you're going to call up some dealers and see if you can sell them some leads. And I remember telling one of them, I turned to him and I said, listen, if it doesn't work out, you can go back to content, I promise. And so they started calling dealers, and within 7 months, we had replaced a lot of that revenue. And we had full line of sight to break even. I was like, okay, that worked. But
some of it is you really had the market power, right? You had the consumers.
we had the traffic, yeah.
Right, so now it's just about building all the plumbing to get to the dealers, but they'd want the traffic. It's very
not
hard.
inconsequential.
Yeah.
As we've learned, dealing with small merchants is challenging. It's not like when I was a TripAdvisor and we were dealing with Expedia or Travelocity, we were typically dealing with a Sloan MBA with a quantitative mind who could think about conversion rates and margin mix and all those good things, and it was a great relationship. In our business, we're dealing with small businesses, car dealers, some of whom are very sophisticated, some of whom who are not, and it's not at all the same type of relationship. So,
you have more salespeople than you have engineers now.
Yes.
Really, as a result,
by a factor of 4, I think.
As a result of that shift in the business.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit opposite of what the general belief system is right now.
We are really smart developers, though.
So the answer is efficiency of developers?
No, but in all seriousness, I mean, that's one of the things I did learn as a product manager at Lotus is that one architect can outcode 10 junior engineers. So it's always better to hire the most senior, bright people you can find, because a typical board member who doesn't understand, it's like, well, just hire more developers.
Right.
And there's diminishing returns to hiring more developers, because the more spaghetti code you put in there, the worse it's going to get, and then it's going to devolve into a big mess. So if you hire great people from day one, you can get a lot more done. Now, clearly, at some point you need to keep adding developers, but I think our standards, both at TripAdvisor and CarGurus, have been very high. I mean, I don't know, I can't even remember what our interview rate to hire is, but it's probably 15 to 1. It's hard to get a job at our company. But as a result, we have really, really good developers. But we are hiring more if anyone's interested.
Hiring developers, but only
Madeline's
really good
right
ones.
here. She'll talk to you afterwards.
Perfect.
But only good ones.
You guys have scaled very fast.
Yes.
What were some deeply held beliefs that you had to shift as you scaled the company?
Yeah, that's been hard. One of our board members told me that, and it's been true. I actually think scaling from 1 employee to call it $100 million in revenue and whatever the number of employees, 60 employees. That was hard, but I actually think going from, the 100 employees to 300 now, soon 800 I would actually say that's harder. It takes a completely different skill set. Managing that amount of people is really hard.
What have you had to give up that you care about?
Pretty much everything.
Everything.
Just kidding.
Well, bringing in product managers, for example, is a big shift.
I mean, it's a whole, and we could spend hours on this, but probably the answer is you hire, so to answer my own question, how do you do it? You hire great people. So I have a great management team. I empower them and get out of their way. What will never work, and I hope I've been good at, is you can't meddle. Like, you cannot get involved in the minutia. Like, I can no longer get involved with what's the font on that page, or what's the pitch on that PR piece.
But Steve Kaufer still writes code, right?
He does, yeah.
So maybe you can. I don't know.
He's a better man than I. But yeah, it's difficult. I mean, to answer your question, there's issues around integrity, making sure everyone's working hard, hopefully having fun. I mean, I think we tried to build an environment at our place where there's not a lot of bureaucracy. We have a general dislike for meetings, so we're trying to minimize meetings as much as possible. You walk through our space, it's more it lends itself to ad hoc meetings where people just get together and fix a problem.
It's very open.
You don't need to have a meeting with 10 people in it. So yeah, I think it's a place where people can come, enjoy work, get stuff done, feel like they're making a difference. So I think that helps us with our recruiting.
We talked a lot about, maybe not a lot, but somewhat about the stereotypes of Boston and how you disagree with them. Let's talk about the stereotype of MBAs. Mm-hmm. So the tech community has been pretty anti-MBA.
Yep. I remember when I started Lotus.
You have one, I have one.
When I started Lotus, everyone told me, like, don't even tell people you have an MBA.
Yeah.
Which is true. I mean, like, I think, you should go to business school because you want to gain access to a tool set that'll help you be a better business person. But you shouldn't go to business school because you want to have a stamp on your resume that'll validate you. Because no one cares about that. They care what's coming out of your mouth or hopefully out of your brain.
At Goldman, they care.
Goldman, well, I don't mean, maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah, if you want to go work at Goldman, then you have other issues too.
Do you hire MBAs?
We do. Yeah. And they've done really well.
Into what kind of roles?
Increasingly into product management, sales, leadership.
Will you play speed round with me?
Sure.
All right. Steve is very hard to trip up on speed round, but
he's pretty hard to trip up on anything.
I tripped him, but I don't think I'm gonna trip you because I don't have as obvious a one. What car do you drive?
I drive a Cayenne.
Okay. And then just tell me what comes to mind when I throw these names at you. Auto Trader.
This is where you shouldn't say what you want to say.
This is how I got Steve. I said Trivago, and he kind of flipped.
Worthy competitor.
Okay, you're getting ready for the road show. Cars.com.
In all seriousness, good folks. No, seriously, this is an interesting story. When we were a big customer of Cars.com, I got a phone call from the CEO's executive assistant, and she's like, Mitch wants to have lunch with you. I'm like, wonder what that's all about. So I'm like, okay, yeah, I can make it like 3 weeks from now on Wednesday. So I flew out. And actually, before I flew out, I was like, can you give me some sense of what this meeting's about? And she's like, well, not really. I was like, oh, man, this is not going to be fun. They're going to fire me or something. I don't know. So I flew out, and I get to the meeting with Mitch, and we have lunch. And the whole lunch, he was just like, tell me about your kids.
He's such a nice guy.
I
spent time with him.
Tell me about your, what do you like to do? And the whole time I'm thinking, like, what is the point? And it quickly, I don't think it hit me until I was on the plane home. I was like, that's just how it works in the Midwest. Like, people in Boston, in San Francisco, they want to know, what's the term sheet? What's the deal? Why are we here? I don't need to know about you. I don't want to know about you. What's the deal? What are we trying to get accomplished? And people in the Midwest, they won't do business with you. And this is kind of ingratiating, I think. It's kind of, it's something that probably more of us should do. Like, he wanted to just know, he wanted to look at my soul. He wanted to know, like, what are you made of? What's your moral fiber before I get too far more into business with you? And I thought that was kind of cool.
He's actually a pretty
so they're
generous
good folks.
guy,
They're
too.
good folks.
Yeah.
I have less negative things to say about them than Auto Trader.
Okay, true. You didn't say anything negative about Auto Trader.
I didn't,
All right,
no.
True Car?
Poorly run company. You just do a histogram of their market cap and you'll see what I mean.
Apple Car?
That whole autonomous car thing, I think is, someone asked me about that recently, someone in the investment community, they asked me like, don't you think the whole autonomous car thing is going to be the end of your business? And I responded by saying, first of all, no. I said, I think autonomous cars is going to be an evolving feature in the car. I said, think about cruise control, think about automatic braking, think about, well, I mean, Tesla, you can get a car that drives itself on the highway. But you can't lose sight of the fact that a car is an emotive purchase. It's a passion. Why do certain people buy Cayennes and other people buy whatever? You know, like it's a part of your personality. And so I just don't believe that people are going to want to share a car. I think there's a segment in the city, much like Uber. I think Uber, by the way, is like roadkill. I would be very scared if I were Uber, because I think Google has their crosshairs on Uber, and they will come out with a autonomously driven Uber-type service that you'll just pick up with your phone and order. So that segment will continue to explode. I think on-demand cars, mostly in an urban setting, is going to continue to explode. But I think your person outside of the city still wants to have that car now. I don't want to wait 6 minutes. And I don't want, I've got my stereo set up the way I want it. It's my car. It's an emotive thing. So.
All right, so I'll stop the speed round because we weren't that good at speed round together anyway. But you talked a little bit about at some point you'll take the company public. Do you want to be a public company CEO? How do you think about that?
I don't look forward to it, no. I value my privacy above all. And so being a public CEO is not something I look forward to, but then again, I look at it as part of life's challenges. It's another thing to have done.
You have a good friend with a lot of experience there.
Yeah, Steve, believe me, there's not a day that goes by that I don't get some great piece of advice from Steve, and he's given me some good advice on that front. But I think, as he's counseled me, as long as I have a great management team and a really good CFO, which we just recently hired, it'll be fine. And more importantly, as long as we continue to post great earnings and revenue growth, it'll take care of itself. But yes, we will. Someday we'll be public.
Well, I, for one, hope to see another Wayfair, HubSpot quality IPO here in Boston. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm happy to open the floor now to questions. We usually have a couple microphones running around. We're going to have one microphone running around. So if you put up your hand, Joe Flaherty's going to come find you and give you the mic, and you can ask a question.
Hi, how are you? Thank you very much, by the way. That was absolutely an amazing lecture. It was really, really great. My question is this. So I run a startup here in Cambridge, and as a founder and as a co-founder, you're trying to figure out how to build a team, how to build a culture. What are the best lessons that you think that would be applicable here to be able to build a culture that really, really grows and sustains for scalability?
Yeah, so we didn't touch on it, but you have a co-founder now? Yeah, that is a huge plus. I did not have a co-founder when I started CarGurus, and that's been harder. It was harder and continues to be harder than I had ever imagined. So the beauty at TripAdvisor is I had Steve, or Steve had me. And so, not unlike a marriage, when you've had a bad day, you've got someone to bitch to. And when I've had a bad day at my company, for the most part, I have no one to bitch to. So it's hard.
This is where a spouse feels incredibly burdened, right? It's right. You go home and you start.
My wife only has so much sympathy in terms of listening to my issues.
About that.
So I think having a great co-founder is really, really important. Obviously, having a profitable company helps too. I don't know, I'm trying to think of what else. Try to make it fun. I mean, try to make sure it's a fun place to come to work. I think we've done a reasonably good job at our place. We have perks, again, because we're profitable, but we do free lunch every day, catered lunch every day. Once a quarter, we do what's called Fun Friday, where we shut the company down and go sea kayaking or play pool or go bowling. We have the obligatory foosball ping pong room, which gets heavy use. And probably most importantly, we touched on this earlier, just trying to create an environment where people feel empowered, that anyone can, come up with an idea or approach me and walk into my office and ask a question. So it doesn't feel hierarchical, so people feel like they can make a difference. Because in the end of it all, if it's a fun place to work and they feel like they can make a difference, people are going to want to work there. So.
Next question. Yep.
Hello, thank you very much first. And my question is, I want to try to understand, get more insight of the industry since you have been working on for so many years. So one question is, what's changed during the last 20 years, like you have seen in this industry, and what's a new trend or new opportunities in the future?
So I catch all of it.
Yeah, it's a little echoey.
So what's changed in the industry in the last 20 years?
In the car industry, or?
Future trends.
Future trends. Oh, wow. That's a big question. I'd probably say the biggest trend is, and this is a bit of a statement of the obvious, but is mobile. I continue to be shocked at the growth of our mobile traffic. So 2 years ago, the percentage of our mobile traffic was 40%. I think last time I looked, about a month ago, it was 65%. And that does not include iPads. It's just pure mobile phone. So if anyone's, again, a bit of a statement of the obvious, but if you're developing anything on the web, the desktop is dead. Don't even bother. It should be almost pure mobile experience. That's probably been the biggest.
And if it's true for car discovery, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that'd probably be one of the things you'd think somebody might sit in front of a desktop.
I mean, again, this is one of those my hypothesis would have been wrong. I would have been said yeah, probably 40% of it mobile, but then people need to come home and do their intensive research. Right. But I mean, it's funny, I was on the T the other day and I was looking around, everyone was like this. It was unbelievable. It's kind of a sad commentary on our lives, but.
In fact, none of you are looking at us right now. No, that's actually better.
So yeah, mobile's probably the biggest thing that surprises me.
Can you talk about your time at TripAdvisor and now starting and ramping up CarGurus and what that's done to your family life and how you've navigated that and maybe some of the sacrifices that people in your family have made?
In terms of my family life?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Well, I think, so to juxtapose it to the life I described as an investment banker, I think I pride myself and the culture, both at TripAdvisor and CarGurus, that number of hours does not correlate to intelligent work. So I work hard at CarGurus, but I don't work crazy hours. I do a little bit of email on Sunday night. I honestly come in at weird hours. I probably won't be at my desk till 9:30, maybe even sometimes 10 in the morning. I like to help get my kids out the door. I go running. And frankly, I can miss the traffic if I come in late. So I'll get my personal life and exercise in and then drive in. And then I'd go home, 7:38, so I'd rather backload it. But the most important thing is I don't expect anyone else in the company to work crazy hours either. I don't think you need to. I think you can work, I think it's about working smart, not necessarily kind of voluminous hours.
I love that you've got this tiny hint of guilt about getting to work at 9:30. It's such a good statement about you. That's the banker gene that has not gone away.
Yeah, those are scary days.
But what about, I'm just building on this question, how does it affect family? Sort of the intensity of building a startup versus maybe having a more typical job?
I don't know. I don't think, it's hard for me to answer for them, but I think I think I'm pretty good about compartmentalizing it and not necessarily letting it spill into my home life. I know my kids get a great kick even today out of pointing at the owl whenever we travel. And I promise I've only pulled the TripAdvisor card 3 times. This is a funny story. When we landed in Rome, and we were all like wickedly jet lagged, my wife and my 3 kids, and we like carefully picked out this one hotel and the specific rooms that I was joining. We got to the front desk, and it's like 5 in the morning in Italy, and the front desk guy couldn't have been meaner. He's like, like whatever, like you'll take whatever rooms I give you. And I shouldn't have done it, but I was like, you ever heard of TripAdvisor? And he's like, of course I've heard of TripAdvisor. I was like, well, I co-founded the company. And like my son, I kid you not, my son turned to me as we walked away. He goes, Dad, like you should see the blood rush out of that guy's face. and I was like, I'm done with you. And then my wife came like behind me, and like about half an hour, she went to the pool, like because they were still trying to get our rooms done. And the guy runs up to me and goes, Madam, we figured out the problem. We had this like ridiculous room. It was like embarrassing. So I've only done that 3 times.
3 times.
Yeah. But it works. It works really well.
And in theory, anyone could just copy that, right?
Well, yeah. I think he probably did Google me at some point.
Yeah, the day you decided to start CarGurus, what are the next set of things you did that day?
Well, one of the things I should have done, and actually I was talking to a friend of mine recently who changed jobs. One of the things I should have done is taken 6 months off and gone windsurfing or just chilled out. That's what I didn't do. I went actually literally from leaving Needham to starting here like the next day. And in retrospect, I wish I had taken some time off to just decompress and go golfing or whatever. But I didn't do that. I kind of dove right back into it. And again, in retrospect, that probably wasn't such a good idea, but it all seemed to have worked out.
I did the exact same thing. I think it's like an entrepreneur's gene. You just can't sit still. So same mistake, same regret. Next question.
So, question is that you have multiple stages of scaling. First, let's say you got 500,000 users. At that point, how did you get those? And then from there to 20 million, how did you scale there? And in the first place, where did you get the content? Because this looks like, owned by dealers. And so that's going to be, in some places you can get the feeds. It's web business, so kind of. So
didn't really hear it well, but the question is, how do we get the inventory?
Inventory is the easy part, but the, scaling first, like, any web business, you need thousands or millions of users before you can say it's a successful business or not. So the very first stage of scaling, how did you scale to a level where you say it's a sustainable business model? And once you determine that, then how did you took it from there to 20 million? Because you didn't raise money, so you certainly used some growth hacking techniques. What were those?
Yeah, so I think the question, I didn't hear it all that well, but I think the question was around how did we scale the business and what issues did we run into? The number one thing if you're doing a web company is obviously audience. If you don't have audience, you don't have anything. And I know this sounds a little bit like, again, a statement of the obvious, but a lot of people have asked me, like, so who does your SEO? Because we do, to be clear, we get a lot of free traffic from Google and Yahoo and MSN. And the answer I give people is fairly consistent to the same one I gave when I was at TripAdvisor is, well, you build a compelling product and you monitor a couple of key ratios. But more importantly, you build a compelling product. And again, that sounds like an obvious issue, but there's so many people out there that sit and fret about, well, how am I going to optimize for Google? What should I do? And that's actually the completely wrong thing to do, because if you begin to fixate on that, you're going to start doing stupid things, and Google will penalize you, and you'll be in a lot of trouble. But if you build a great product that's unique and has great consumer statistics, so there's a couple of things we do track carefully at our site, and we release code probably 3 or 4 times a day. We're always tracking, we're always doing A/B tests to track session duration, bounce rate, and it's kind of general consumer happiness. But the two we track the most are bounce rate and session duration. So for those of you that don't know what those 2 ratios are, a bounce rate is if someone comes to that first web page and then leaves without viewing any other pages, that's called a bounce. If you have a high bounce rate, probably north of like 30%, that's really bad. That means that people, and Google can measure these things, by the way, as can MSN and Yahoo. And they'll measure, like, if someone leaves, Google.com and goes to a page and they notice that, 50% of those come right back in a short span, they're going to measure that as a bad user experience, and you're going to get demoted. Session duration is another one. If someone has a 8-minute session duration on your site, it probably means they're pretty engaged. If they have a 10-second session duration, that's probably pretty bad. So those are some of the, we track a lot of things, but we're always tracking the consumer experience. Is the consumer having a great experience? Because if you do that, clearly, the search engines will, be good to you. But more importantly, you're treating the consumer with a good, they're having a great experience, and they're going to tell 10 friends. I mean, word of mouth is probably the most effective form of marketing ever.
I've actually seen numerous companies go out of business because Google changed their algorithm around the way that they were manipulating it, and it just crushed their traffic, and VCs weren't excited anymore, and it just killed the business.
Yep.
So it does happen. Yeah, where's the,
Next question. I'm in the early stage of my startup and I have my first angel meeting this month. And you started to touch upon this in the speed round, talking about your competition. I'd love to hear, how do you talk to your investors about your competition? Is it a, I'm going to chew them up sort of conversation? Is it a poking holes in their game?
Actually, at our board meetings, honestly, haven't talked about our competition at all. I mean, I don't, it's funny, I recently did an interview with Entrepreneur Magazine because someone was asking me, like, what influence my mother had on me. And I told them, like, one of the best things my mom ever taught me, she was the head of the English department at this high school I went at. And she always taught me, because I was always pretty competitive, and she's like, stop worrying about what that person's grades were or what your class rank is. She's like, stop worrying about that. Focus on your own work. Like, focus on yourself. And I kind of have the same philosophy at our company. I don't spend a lot of time worrying about what my competition's doing. I spend a lot of time worrying about what I'm doing and what our company's doing. And are we addressing our customers' needs, both our consumer customers and our dealer customers? And I figure if we're killing it in those two dimensions, the rest of it will take care of itself. So I would probably urge you not to spend a lot of time. I mean, you need to be cognizant of them. You can't just work in a vacuum. But I think the more you internalize what you're doing and how you're addressing your customers' needs are, I think the rest of it will take care of itself.
For what it's worth, I think investors ask about it more to try to really understand your differentiation than to hear you bash your customers. I think that's usually shows a certain immaturity, although admittedly I've done it. But I think that's really why they're asking the question. They're trying to really understand where you fit into the market.
Yeah, and honestly, I've been surprised, actually, that how little competition we've seen in our sector. And I think part of that has to do with the heritage of some of the competitors we're up against, where a lot of them are kind of traditional media companies that have evolved onto the internet, and they aren't really pure technology companies. And I think they've also been hindered by having a big install base that they had to kind of, it's almost the analogy of like, why did Polaroid and Kodak get crushed by digital cameras? Well, for obvious reasons, but they had this big install base they had to maintain. They couldn't just switch on a dime. And in our case, this thing we did, this kind of, it was quite controversial when we did this whole good deal, bad deal, rating dealer inventory on behalf of the consumer. I mean, believe me, I don't want to underestimate at all the backlash we got from the dealer community. It was vicious. So, Cars.com or Trader would never even think about doing that because, Trader's got $1 billion revenue line. They're not going to jeopardize that for some crazy idea about, putting a judgment on some dealer's inventory. That's probably wouldn't go over real well at the boardroom there. So many times in our case, we were blessed because we didn't have this kind of history that we had to maintain.
Maybe two more, yeah.
So this is fantastic. I'm glad they're recording it. So entrepreneurship versus a job. Can you give the challenges back and forth with it?
So entrepreneurship as a...
Versus a career choice versus as a job.
Oh yeah, that's easy. I was up at Dartmouth actually giving a talk to their entrepreneurial network. Their big kind of, it's almost like their 50K contest. And I was telling the undergrads, it's like, listen, being an entrepreneur is like so much better than having a job because what's the worst thing that happens? If it fails, you go get a job. And it's like, I think being an entrepreneur is great because, some pros and cons. I'll talk about the pros and I'll talk about the cons. The pros are, no one tells me what to do every day. I get up in the morning, I do what I want to do. I have ultimate flexibility to go watch my kids' lacrosse games, and if I need to go watch their kids' lacrosse games at 4, I go, and no one tells me not to. So I have a lot of autonomy. You know, the bad side is it's a 7/24 job. I mean, you're always on. You don't get a day off. You're always worrying and thinking. When I'm running, I'm thinking about it. When I'm taking a shower in the morning, I'm thinking about it, which is, I see as a pro. Some people wouldn't like that. I mean, some people just aren't wired that way. They like to, when they go home at 5, they just want to shut it down and not have to think about it till the next day. If you're like that, that's probably a sign that it's not really meant for you. But I'm always thinking about stuff for the company.
And take a minute and talk about the responsibility of leadership, because I'm not sure that's something everybody loves or wants.
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, you know, every employee we hire has a spouse and kids, and that's a lot of responsibility to have, you know, 300 times 3 or 4, you know, 900 people depending on you. Yeah. So yeah, that's a lot of responsibility you have to be able to deal with. But thank God, in our case, you know, we're really profitable, and so I don't worry about that too much anymore. But yeah.
Last one more.
You talked about loving to work with good people, and I was just wondering, like, good people, do you mean honest, conscientious, hardworking? So, like, if just one trait that
Curious.
only one, you
Curious.
know, you say this person's worth it for me to hire or work with or become a mentor.
Yeah,
to.
I'm always looking for curious people. Typically when I interview someone, I always want to hire the person that has the smartest brain power that I can. Like, and I actually probably don't even care if they've worked in this industry. Like, I know at TripAdvisor, we constantly got resumes from people who had worked at Travelocity or Expedia or WorldSpan, and invariably, I think there's a lot of baggage that comes with that when you've worked in an industry and you can't bring a fresh perspective. Frankly, a lot of the best people we hired and this is going to sound kind of ironic given what I said earlier, but some of the best people we hired were from Bain or BCG, who could come in with like this analytical mind and just attack it and come up with different ways of looking at it. Adam Medros,
yeah,
great hire.
He runs product at TripAdvisor.
Yeah. But to answer your question, curiosity is what I'm always looking for. You know, are they the kind of person that, you know, wakes up in the middle of the night and jots down ideas? So they're the kind of person that is going to question everything and not necessarily, you know, use the standard solution to a problem. Yeah.
Well, if anyone's in the market for a car,
use CarGurus.
Go to CarGurus.
Tell your friends.
If you're looking for a really cool job, obviously there's a good company
We are
to check
hiring.
out. They are hiring
Everywhere.
And
Madeline's here. She'd be happy to talk to you.
Yep. And you know, I just want to say thank you to Langley.
this is
Thank you
fun.
so much. Really appreciate it. So the one favor we do ask, we do a free event. Hopefully everybody really enjoys it. Whether or not you enjoy it, the one favor we ask is you're going to get a survey tomorrow. We pick our guests from the survey. We change a lot of things based on the feedback we get. But please give us feedback. So just take 2 minutes, look at it. It's not long, and we really do value that. But thanks for coming out. Thanks for being a part of it. Appreciate it.
Thanks.